But we're going to start at the very back half,
yes.
Okay? Because we want you guys to know what our least favorite is. And we are on the same boat with this one. And you guys know from our top 5 from ITCAFpodcast that it's Thor 4. Love and Thunder just was awful. Did not enjoy it at all. They tried to capitalize on the comedic aspect of Ragnarok, and in my opinion, they failed.
Yeah, and in the Star's opinion, Chris Hemsworth has come out recently and said, we went a little too far, it was a little bit crazy, it didn't work. No shit. Like, for me, the only good thing about this whole thing was Christian Bale.
Yeah.
And had they gone that dark route like they did in the third act with him and brought the seriousness of Thor a little bit in that third act, it would have been a whole different situation. Mm-hmm. But for more than 2/3 of the movie, it was awful. I mean, when he's having this jealousy, I'm in love with my hammer shit, and it's following him around, like, what the fuck was that?
What is going on?
It was not, and there was so much potential there.
There was.
You had the storyline with Jane Foster and using the hammer to save her, and how that affected her, and how it affected Thor, and you had so much opportunity to go with the right storyline there, which was an amazing storyline in the comic books. When I saw that they were going to do Jane Foster and they were going to, I was like all in. Oh my gosh, she's going to be Thor. That means they're going the cancer route. They're going to do. I was so excited, and then we got that piece of shit, and I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
happened?
Because they set Christian Bale up to be this massive bad villain type, but he was really only on screen for maybe 15 minutes of the whole hour and a half movie. So number 32 for both of us, Thor 4. Ugh. Now we start to differentiate, I believe, a little bit on, the placement of these ones, but still around the same area. Number 31 for me is Thor 2. The Dark World. I was not a fan, just that aspect. Like we talk about all the time, they just did not get Thor right in these individualized movies. So I just feel like, that placement right there is adequate for this film.
Same. Thor the Dark World.
Yeah,
see, I think that they tried to go dark with it, right? Make it a little bit, and it failed so bad, which is why Ragnarok happened. They tried to correct it with comedy, and then they fucked that up by going too far. So they didn't go enough. They didn't go far enough. Then they went too far. And these two movies are like the perfect example of what too dark doesn't work, too comedic doesn't work. Therefore, our two least favorite Marvel movies.
Yeah, exactly. It only makes sense. Number 30 for me is the original Thor. I'm sure you're sensing a theme here. The Thors are definitely my least favorite quadruple or whatever out of the franchise or out of the universe. Like I said, they're not entertaining to me. They're a little boring. I'm just like, just sitting in the theater, just like, what's the point of all of this? The point is to set up other shit. That was the point, I felt like. So number 30 for me was the original Thor.
Same. Thor. The only time they got Thor right, and this is not at all a dig on Hemsworth. He's amazing in the role. He's a brilliant Thor, but it's on the filmmakers. I'm sorry, but the only time they got him right is in the movies. And I think the most right they got him is in Infinity War and Endgame. That is Thor. That's the Thor. There's a little joke here or there, but this is a fucking god, and he knows he's a god, and he's a badass. That's Thor.
That's Thor.
The jokes with Thor is because he's a god and he knows he's better than everybody else, basically, and he jokes around to that. He's arrogant. The jokes are meant to be arrogance. And so we'll get to that though. But I agree with you, Thor. It just
Okay, so now I think this is where we start to differ a little bit.
Yes.
Number 29 for me is Hulk. And everybody knows I said it on my top 5 for ITCAF that I'm not an Ed Norton fan. Him in this universe, I feel like just felt out of place for me. So I wasn't a fan at all. And I felt like, I wanted to see the, what was it? The Gamma Dogs? The Gamma Dogs from that other Hulk movie? The Incredible Hulk, or which was, yes. Number 29 for me is Hulk.
Thank God the Incredible Hulk is not a part of the MCU. That was fucking Emerald Green? We're not going to fucking Oz. It's the Hulk. I mean, and Gamma Dogs. And yes, he gets bigger as he gets stronger. But that fucking like King Kong size Hulk. Oh my God, that fucking piece of shit
They
sucked.
ain't got shit on him, okay?
No, man, they sucked. But mine is Thor Ragnarok, and I'll tell you why. Because I can't help but put all the Thors at my least favorite. Okay, so my number 29 is Thor Ragnarok. Now, while I think it is the best solo Thor movie out of all of them, and there were aspects of Thor that were right. The relationship between him and Hulk was great. Like, the I'm a badass, and the little bit with Thanos kind of stuff. That was all good. Beyond all that, it fucking sucked. But I loved Hulk. This should have been a Hulk movie. I would have been kind of okay with it. It wouldn't be this far up on my list of least favorites. But because I liked their dynamic. In fact, the only reason I like this movie is because of their dynamic. And the way they got Thor right was when he was interacting with Hulk. And so but other than that, I did not like it. Again, there was so much potential with Valkyrie and all the different things with Smart Hulk and all these things they could have gone and they didn't. So I love everything they got right, but unfortunately for me, the majority of it was not right, and so it's up there. Yeah, my least favorite, all the Thor movies.
All the Thor movies. Now we're on 28. 28 for me is Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Now, this is basically majority about the villain. I explained a little bit about this on our top 5 as well. I really did not like the whole I'm your dad, but I'm also a planet, and I killed your mom, and all this shit. I'm just like, what? What is going on? Like, give me the, I loved the first one. I loved Guardians of the Galaxy, the original with Ronan, and actually having like a big baddie type of character. But when, you got a planet, and it's kind of that mind fuckery. And then at the end where he literally transforms into the planet and like all this stuff, I'm just like, what are we seeing here right now? So that's why I put it at 28 for me. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
And James Gunn, he's going to go over the top. Look at the giant star, kind of a thing in Suicide Squad. He's going to do that. And but I'm with you there, and I'll give you my thoughts on that one. But my number 28 is basically for the same reason. My number 28, and I hate to say this because you guys know I've long said Favreau is one of my all-time inspirations. I think he's a brilliant director, and I love pretty much everything he does. But my number 28, Iron Man 2, for the same reason. It was the most horrible rendition of Whiplash I've ever seen in my life. It fucking sucked. Mickey Rourke was awful. He looked like some drunk stumbling, I don't even know. This whole movie just did not work for me. It felt forced. It felt hurried. I mean, if you look at the difference between when they came out, right? It's just 2 years. Boom, boom.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was a filler movie, and I felt like its only purpose was to introduce Black Widow. And they could have done that in Iron Man 1,
That's
the
fair.
end of Iron Man 1 somewhere. They could have plopped that in there, and it would have been fine. They could have done that in Hulk. Now that we knew that there was a little backstory between Hulk and Black Widow, they could have done that in Hulk. I just feel like it didn't work. It was rushed. The villain sucked, and you could have introduced Black Widow anywhere. So it did not work for me. So that's why my number 28, Iron Man 2.
I understand. Number 27 for me is Captain America First Avenger. It's very low on the list because Cap is honestly not one of my favorites. But I will say that his movies are probably, they're not the best trilogy out, or the however many 4 that are going to be in the franchise. It is one of the best, but him as a character is not one of my favorites. I don't know. He grew on me as the films progressed and as more of them came out. And where he's at now, where he was at in Endgame, I feel like, is my favorite version of Cap. But I don't know. I'm never that big of a fan of, you gotta follow the straight and narrow, mind your P's and Q's. Like, I get it. I get where he's coming from, where his time period and all that stuff. Language, freaking work in Avengers Age of Ultron. But, I just feel like, with him not being my favorite character, of course the origin story of him is not going to be one of my favorite movies. But like I said, I love that they Easter egg dropped, Bucky Barnes, because they set up that for future Cap movies and Avengers movies. But yeah, I know I couldn't put it anywhere close to the middle of the road. So that's why I got to put number 7, Captain America, the First Avenger.
I can't I can't agree on that, and we'll get to that. He's one of my favorites for the very reason you said you didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, to be the hero that can't cross the line.
Yeah.
It's like DC's Superman. But
yeah.
We'll get to that when I get to it.
Yeah.
But my number 27 is, again, I have a hard time saying this I just Iron Man 3. And I really like Iron Man. Don't get me wrong. Everybody's like, he's dogging Iron Man. He's dogging Iron Man.
Right.
You'll see how high Iron Man is at the top of my list when we get there. But, again, this movie just felt like we need a filler. And we need to get him from the armor that's like attached to the living armor that he eventually becomes. And this is our quick, easy way to do it. And I just felt like they could have done that a gazillion other ways. And I felt like they didn't have to do a whole movie on it. Mm-hmm. And it just, for that reason, it just, again, I don't like when they just use a filler movie to introduce a plot point. It's a plot point. You can literally just put that in anything else. You don't need a whole movie to say this is the transition of his armor, right? I mean, he's basically telling you about the transitions of his armor in all the movies. You don't need a whole movie to see it. I did like the kid. I did, who's we're going to see as Iron Lad, no doubt about it. Ty Simpkins. I think that's the correct name. I liked that aspect of it. Again, there were things that I liked, but I just couldn't get behind the whole movie because I just feel like it was, again, a filler movie. Hey, we need a way to show the new armor.
Yeah.
A whole movie to show the new armor? It just, I don't know. I didn't, or how he could control the armor remotely from like everywhere, the whole army of them. Like we knew he could do that. We didn't need all that. I don't know. I felt like it was unnecessary.
Okay. We'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to where that's at on my list. Number 26 for me, and I know this one's kind of lower for you as well, Eternals. I really didn't mind Eternals. Of course, it was that slower burn that, not a lot of people knew about the backstory and who these characters were and, like, what they meant to the MCU. I really just, the slower pacing is very hard for me. If it's not a good story-driven film and it's slower paced, I have a hard time like actually enjoying it. But like I said, I enjoyed the fight sequences. I enjoyed what they set up with, the LGBT community, first superhero, gay superhero, and I enjoyed what they set up with, Cal Harrington, the dude from Game of Thrones character as the Black Knight, I believe his name is, and Firefox, of course, Harry Styles. But I just, it was that slower burn of a type movie that isn't necessarily good in my opinion. It makes it kind of difficult, but there was certain aspects of this film that I took away that I was like, okay, I'm glad I watched it one time for the one time, but it's definitely not up there on my list. And I feel like that's probably the way it is for a lot of people. So that's why I got it so low. Number 26, The Eternals.
My 26 is Eternals as well.
See?
and I'll tell you what, if they eliminate the complete first act,
yeah, fair,
and the movie was just the second act on, it's way further up on my list of favorite movies.
Yeah.
The whole first act was a way too long process of introducing these characters. We don't need it.
Yeah.
You don't. It doesn't matter if you're not a comic book fan and have no idea who these people are. They didn't worry about that in Guardians. They didn't. James Gunn didn't feel like that was a necessary thing to spend an entire act introducing these characters. He just jumped right in. Here they are. I think that's what was necessary for Eternals.
Yeah.
Nobody would have cared. Nobody would have cared. We did not need an entire act to tell us who these people were. Mm-hmm. And it just made the movie drag. And by the time the second act hit and it starts to pick up, you're already bored with it. You're already like, okay, well, I'm going to hang in because I've been here this long.
Might as well, because it was like almost 3 hours.
Yeah, but you kind of lose that excitement. Where had it just come right out of the gate with second act on, I think it's a hit. And I think it's way up further on people's lists had they done that. But
I agree. See, this is where the balance starts shifting, right? We're talking a little bit more about what we like about the movie and, what they could have done better and things like that. So that's what you're going to see continuing on, because it does start to get very difficult from now until probably the top 10, because there's a lot of these movies that I really did enjoy, but I just couldn't put it further than what it is because there's so many more better movies than what these are. Number 25 for me is Ant-Man and the Wasp 2, or Ant-Man and the Wasp, not Ant-Man 2, but Ant-Man and the Wasp. I think I put this one so far down is because, like you said with Iron Man 3, this is kind of just a setup of the quantum realm, right? It's kind of just to show what the future of the MCU is going to look like and how deep they're going to dive into it and what characters they're going to use to explore this whole universe and multiverse and things like that. Actually getting what's her face, Wasp in the suit, I felt like that was awesome. But they teased a little bit of that in the original Ant-Man. But yeah, I just felt like it was a very middle of the road type of movie. Nothing really stuck out to me from it. Nothing was really like awful, but it was just that middle of the road kind of like, okay, it's there. I mean, I'll watch it if it's on, but I'm not gonna go on Disney Plus and specifically put Ant-Man and the Wasp on to watch it for enjoyment. So that's my opinion.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. My number 25 is Avengers Age of Ultron. I was let down by this movie. Ultron is one of the greatest villains in Marvel Comics, in my opinion, and what he's done in the Avengers and his individual battles between certain heroes throughout the history of his character, brilliant.
Yeah.
And then they tell me they're casting James Spader, a reunion between James Spader and Robert Downey Jr. I am all in. I'm thinking this is going to be one of the most epic movies ever, because I fucking love James Spader as a villain. And then you're going to make him one of the all-time greatest villains in Marvel.
Yeah.
And it just didn't happen for me. It didn't happen for me. It fell short. The trailer was great when he's like, there are no strings attached. Yeah, I just, everything, I was so pumped. And then I felt like this was, again, they used it to set up plot points. They didn't give us everything, right? They set up the Sokovia agreements. They're setting up Civil War. This movie basically set up, here's where we're going to start to see the divide between Iron Man and Cap of what's right and what's wrong. And is this good or is this bad? And the quick introduction of how do we get Scarlet Witch in there? How do we get Quicksilver in there? By the way, why would you introduce Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch and then kill Quicksilver off right away? That didn't make sense to me either. There's a whole story dynamic between those. Quicksilver is one of those questionables. He's willing to do bad things in the right of what he thinks is good.
Yeah.
And there was so much more you could have gone with that character that I felt like they fell short on. So again, this was the setup, in my opinion, for Civil War. It's like, how can we set up the Sokovia agreement that causes the rift? How can we introduce Scarlet Witch real quick into the mix and do it with a big baddie? And, it could have been infinitely better. That said, I don't hate the movie. I think it's a really good movie. I just think it could have been much better than it turned out to be. So that's why it's up there. Avengers Age of Ultron, my number 25.
I understand. Number 24 for me is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I know. When they were billing this thing as like this horror thriller, you should have, like, this whole horror, because they didn't really say thriller a lot. They said horror, their first ever like horror film. And I just, going into it, I was expecting that, but there was probably like one jump scare where just Scarlet Witch just like pops out of nowhere. But I mean, other than that, it wasn't a bad movie. Some of the pacing was a little off sometimes, as you'll see throughout my list. Pacing is a big thing for me. So that was really cool. Like what you said when we were talking about this off air, this one is also a setup movie. I feel like, a lot of misguided films for the MCU are really just setup movies for, the big ones, the team collaborative efforts for like the Avengers movies or like Civil War or different things like that. So I get it. I understand. But at the same time, I feel like you could have done things better. But I am excited to see what they do next, because they also teased a lot of stuff. They teased Doctor Strange's wife. That coming into the dynamic, and we love Charlize Theron, so that's going to be really cool. And of course, they teased in What If a certain element of Doctor Strange, and they brought this to live action for this film, so that was really cool. But again, kind of like that middle of the road type of movie, so you can't put it further than what it is. So, yep, Doctor Strange number 2 at 24 for me.
Okay, I will give all of my disagreeing opinions on that when we get there. My number 24 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I thought it was a really good movie. The characters were still spot on. He's so good at keeping the characters' continuity correct, right? They don't change from film to film. They are who they are and they stay who they are, and he's consistent with that, and I love that. But I would agree with you. I have it up there in my 20s because it was just a bit much for me. I get that character is a bit much in the comic books too, but I feel like it could have been a bit more grounded. He grounded the Guardians, if you can possibly do that with a talking tree and a raccoon and everything, right? But they felt grounded. They felt like this could be a real thing, where I feel like you could have gone that route with Ego, but he didn't. Yeah. And he went this big kind of that's where he lost me a little bit on it. I felt like he's done an amazing job with almost all of his films in superhero genres to keep it grounded. And like even with the upcoming Superman, talking about how we have to show most powerful being in the universe, but also a farm boy from Kansas, and he's keeping it grounded. And I just felt like he missed the mark on this one with the villain, so that's why it's there for me.
Oh yeah, for sure, I completely agree. So I feel like I just feel like they approached that differently, but we also know that James Gunn did have to go back and rewrite some stuff.
Yeah, he was told to not. He wasn't allowed to do things that he wanted to do in that film because of future films.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes that can make it really difficult. So,
for sure. Number 23 for me is Black Widow. Black Widow, number 23. Just because, again, I feel like it's that middle of the road movie to where, like, it was good. I really love Florence Pugh. I really love David Harbour. And just everybody who they had involved with this one. But I don't know. I felt like the pacing wasn't that bad. I shouldn't say. The pacing wasn't that bad, but I really liked the villain. What was the villain's name again? The Armorer, or not the Armorer, but the girl, the villain on Black Widow?
Yeah, but it's
escaping your mind too? Okay, fantastic. The comic book guy over here. Taskmaster.
Yeah. No, you threw me off when you said girl because they changed the gender on her. Taskmaster's not like it's so.
So I thought I thought that backstory was a little different, and I didn't necessarily like it all that much. So that's kind of where I fell, and that's why it kind of fell on my list. Taskmaster is still like a badass character, and it'll be interesting because aren't there different iterations of Taskmaster?
Well, yeah, and they did, yeah.
So maybe if we can go into that with that character in further films, maybe. But yeah, like I said, I think this was kind of just a middle of the road one for me. So number 23, Black Widow.
All right, number 23 for me, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's up there because for me, it failed. It had everything right. It had the story. It had the characters. It's setting up the next big baddie. We're going and we're going to do all this stuff. And then they just fell short. They fell short for me. Kang the Conqueror, y'all. Kang the Conqueror. He didn't really conquer shit. Like he wasn't. They didn't show how powerful a badass he really is. They hint at it throughout the whole movie, but he basically gets bitch slapped at the end. And it's like, this guy could have been, Jonathan Majors, personal outside stuff aside, because we don't know where that's going, but he's a great actor and a great bad guy. And they could have done him. I think they did a much better job with him in Loki, showing the maniacal, bad guy that he is. They just didn't go. They missed it for me. MODOK, I think they had great opportunity with MODOK, and they kind of failed there. And just overall, I just, you had everything going for it story-wise, and it just didn't click for me. It just missed the target. And that's unfortunate because I like the Ant-Man movies, and I love Paul Rudd, and I think there's a lot of potential there. And obviously with Stinger coming and like the Young Avengers, and there was so much there to explore. But they just, for me, missed the target. I mean, it just didn't hit where it needed to hit for me.
Yeah, I understand that. Number 22 for me is Captain Marvel. I honestly really, this is where we get into the parts where I'm like, I just like some better than that one. But Captain Marvel for me, I love 90s. Of course, born in the 90s. I'm a 90s child, but love that whole dynamic. I love the Skrull dynamic too. I'm really excited where they like continue on that Secret Invasion. I believe that's where we're going to see more of that, which is coming out soon, or might have already come out depending on when this video comes out. But I'm really excited about that whole storyline. I just feel like, Captain Marvel as a character isn't necessarily my favorite. She's not my least favorite, but she's kind of, just her in general is kind of a middle of the road. And I don't necessarily mind Brie Larson too. I know a lot of people don't like Brie Larson. I don't mind her either. She's just not one of my favorite characters. But I did enjoy the movie though. I thought it was really good, really well done. I love the fucking cat. That was so funny. But and the soundtrack was so good. But again, I think I put it at this point in time on my list just because Captain Marvel just does, as a character, just doesn't do it that much for me. But I enjoyed the movie. I mean, it has nothing to do with the movie. It's just the character. So number 22 for me, Captain Marvel.
Yeah, I just want to preface, I think all these mid-20s, high teens for me could have been interchangeable. Yeah. I don't really hate these movies at all. They just needed to fall somewhere on the list. And I couldn't put them at movies I hated, so and difficult. I couldn't put them at the movies I love the best. So it's just kind of here they are. My number 22 is Ant-Man and the Wasp. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a really fun movie. I think they capitalized on everything they did right in the first movie. And I was excited for it. And I did. I don't really have a whole lot of bad things to say about it. I just needed to put it somewhere on my list. And the reason I put it at 22 is I felt like it could have been a bit more than it was. I enjoyed it, but I think it could have been a bit more. Again, I think going back to my theme here, we needed a reason to make Hope Wasp. Right? Yeah. We explained that Janet was Wasp, and now we need a reason to suit up Hope. And this was that movie. Okay, somehow we need to make a filler movie to get Hope into the suit. And that's what this movie was. They did a good job. I enjoyed the movie. I thought it worked. And, but I feel like it could have been more. Yeah. And that's all I'm saying. I wanted more because I did enjoy it. So
yeah, for sure, man, for sure. Number 21 for me is the original Ant-Man. I really enjoyed this one. Again, I love when they started to kind of shift a little bit, and maybe the turn that maybe not a lot of people like, where they started adding more comedic elements into it rather than dramatic elements. Hopefully they switch back because, like we said, we prefer the mostly dramatic with a sprinkle of comedy in there, not the other way around where it's mostly comedy and a sprinkle of dramatic. But yeah, I feel like, this one is a very difficult one to put at this spot, but with just liking more, I just had to put it there. 21 for the original Ant-Man. But again, I really enjoy the character. We love Paul Rudd, but more movies I feel like are better. So,
okay. Yeah. My number 21, Doctor Strange. I liked this movie. I think that Benedict is the perfect Doctor Strange. I think they got the character exactly right. His sense of arrogance, the sense of I know everything, but I don't really know everything. They introduced the sorcerer world in the MCU, and I thought they did it brilliantly. I really have nothing bad to say about this. I don't think they spent too much time on his origin. They got to it quickly about the car accident and why and into the sorcery and everything. I just needed a place to put this one. Right. And again, I don't hate this movie at all. I don't think it deserved to be near the top of my list of most hated, but I don't think it was quite there to be in my list of most favorite just because it's an origin movie. And most of the standard origin movies are kind of like, okay, it's the origin movie. We need this, but then we'll wait for the next one. Right. So I don't know. That's why I kind of put it there. It's not like it's mid-level for me. It's a good origin story, but it's not great, but it's not bad. So there you go.
Agreed. All right. So number 20 for me is Iron Man 2. I know you have different opinions on that one. I think it's because I am such an Iron Man lover, and that's by far my favorite superhero in the MCU. So it's hard to kind of even like say anything negative about it, even though like I understand all of your opinions about it. But yeah, I just, the pacing was a little and some of the other stuff is kind of just setups, but I just love any second that Iron Man is on screen. So that's why all of the Iron Man movies are higher maybe than what they're supposed to be. But I just gotta put it higher than what some of the others. So Iron Man 2, number 19.
Just the whole thing for me that epitomizes 20. My whole thought on the entire movie is the scene at the racetrack where the goofy ass suit coming out of the briefcase and just that whole fight right there. That's the whole movie for me. Like this is the movie, and it wasn't very good.
Yeah, I understand.
My number 20. It's for the same reasons that I just said about Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel. Obviously, I loved all the characters. I'm a huge Captain Marvel fan, and I know where we're getting with her. I hope that we see Binary. I hope that we get there. I think it's going there. I really enjoyed this movie, and I liked how they showed the dynamic of the history between her and Fury and all the different, and Coulson, even bringing back Coulson and showing all that. But it was an origin movie. It was a needed origin movie because we had to get her into the Avengers, and we needed to see who she was and where she came from and how Coulson knew about her. But that's it. It was a good movie. It wasn't a great movie, and it wasn't a bad movie. It's just a good origin movie.
Yeah.
So therefore, right in the middle of my list.
I understand.
20.
I understand.
Captain Marvel.